This is Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. We're going to continue Simin Lamed Beis. Today we're going to learn the rest of Sif 15b. And Sif 15b has been middle of discussing whether the parts within each letter, the inside of the hey, the inside of the mem, whether that also has to be mukaf gevil, whether that also has to be fully full with parchment or not. And the Yerushalmi said yes, and then we concluded with halachas whether there'll be a hole in the leg of the hay or etc. But now says the Ramah in the middle of Sif 15b al shar poiskim matzrichim k'malei ois. The rest of the poiskim need the malei ois. 1 second, kitana v'hachi helchasa. We'll see in a moment exactly what this means. But finishing off the reading of Sif 15b, nikiv regel yamini. If there's a hole in the right leg, im nishtayir mimenu meloi ois kitana. If there's still the amount left from an ois kitana, a small letter, kosher vimlav, it's going to be pasul. So before we even see the Mishnah Berurah over here for the end of Sif 15b, let's right away go and see the pictures over here. Here we go. This is not the right picture. 1 second. Here it is. This is the correct picture. Let's get it nice and big. Here we go. This is the Ramah. The Shar Paiskin Matzrichen, and this is referring to picture Beis and picture Gimel, Kimole Ois Kitana, that the amount of space of the letter has to be left the size of a small letter. V'achi Yilchasa said the Ramah. And now the Mishnah Berurah that we're about to see in a moment, quoted over here in this picture, teaches us that you need She'in Bei Chesaroin Mishum HaKofas Gevil. That it is no issue of a kavas kvel, kigoin, as you see over here in picture Beis and picture Gimel, that after the proper hay was written, then it had this issue. Whereas, if that was not the case, if there was a hole, and it says over here that we should see page 89, picture 1, here you go. Whereas, if there was a hole first, and then you wrote the letter, then even though in this hay there's still this little part, the Mali Ois Kitana left, it's not going to be good because the letter was never written bekashus. Now let's see the Mishnah Berurah as he's going to explain this to us inside. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan, Lamites. Srichen Kamali Ois Kitana. Umayri says the Mishnah Berurah. Be'inan she'in by chisar misham hakafas gvil, like we just saw that there's no issue with hakafas gvil, meaning the letter was fully surrounded by parchment. Going, for example, Sheni gave that it got a hole la'achar aksiva, as we saw yesterday, that once the letter is written bekashros, if there's a hole surrounding it afterwards, that's not as big of a problem. Because we'll see tomorrow. Because if not, everyone would agree it's possible. Says the Mishnah Berurah, for these words it appears the loy lahachmer bilvad pasal kedas shar paiskim. The loy lahachmer bilvad pasal kedas shar paiskim. Ella dibshita lei dalach kavasau. It's pasha this halacha. Vim Cain says Mishnah Berurah sarch lahazir meoy lasvarim shel shamazeh. Says Mishnah Berurah, many paiskim are careless about this. You got to warn them a lot because everyone agrees this is the halacha. But Tefilin mezuzahs meaning kisidron. By Tefilin mezuzahs, as we've learned, has to be kisidron, that if there's a mistake, you can't go back and fix it. Taking won't help at all. If you do even if you could read it, if it wasn't the proper os. Kivan, why? Shanu Ryan Chain Latur doesn't have the proper tzura. If without this little bit left, the size of a nice kitana, it's not called a hay. Fidasi la paiskim lam seven chavei ayin sham. Kol makan near the yesha hakalai they take and says Mishmur. Even though what I just said is the lechatchila and the paiskim should be careful, and you need to have that little bit when it's written. Says Mishmur, it appears it would help to fix it. But yesha hakal prima gadol bekaf pshuta, like the prima gadol is meikal shasay meruba. They taken that you couldn't make it squared. They taken that if the kaf looks like a bees, you're able to cut off the end and make it look like a kaf. And we continue in Sif 15b. That what happens next? Nikiva regel hayamini, if the rightmost leg gets a hole, if there's the size of an ois kitana, it's going to be kosher again. Before we even see the Mishnah Berurah, let's again see a picture of what's this referring to. First of all, Stam, this is showing you how we can help to scratch it off in order to make it into the appropriate Chaf Soifis. Let's continue over here, getting the next picture up, Sif 15b, here it is, that Nikiv Regala Yamini, that if you wrote your proper letter, and then what happened, you got a little hole in your hay. And it says the Mishnah Berurah, this is what the Mishnah Berurah is about to teach us. We're just seeing it in the picture book inside. If there's the size of the Ois Kitana, this letter Gimel left of the hay, then it's going to be kosher. But if it's not the size of an Ois Kitana, it's going to be apostle. And the Shulchan Aruch is talking about the height. Let's just continue for one more moment. In picture here, number 2, it shows us similarly that if the letter got a crack in it, beloy nekev, or it was erased a little bit, as long as the remaining part is the size of an ois kitana, that is going to be fine. One more picture, number 3 over here, before we go and learn Sif 15b. Says that the picture, quoting the Mishnah Berurah, similarly, if a little bit of the thickness, as you see over here, it got a bit erased. As you see over here, it got scratched off. You still have this thin little line. So if you have a srita daka, if you have a thin line left that's black, like a vav, as you see over here, you have a thin line left, like a yud, then it's going to be kosher, because there's no shear, a rule that we saw yesterday, and I'm sure we'll see many times. Ein shear there's no shear to the thickness of the letters. Rather, it's going to be as long as it still has the size of Ois Kitana. This, by the way, answers up a question that many people have on these teeny Sifrei Torah. You look at them and it's like micro writing. It's the skinniest thing ever. And the answer is, as we're learning here today, and we learned the other day, there's no shear to the thickness of the letter. But let's continue now. Let's learn the Mishnah Berurah Sif 15b together. Nikav Rekala Yamini Vu Adin, says the Mishnah Berurah, Im Nifsak Ois below nekev, if it cracked without a hole, or erased a little bit, as we saw, if it got cut off, if it got skinnier, that in this sweet daka, we have a thin line, it's going to be kosher. Why? The ein shear loivi oisius. Of course, as we've done after, it's written Bekashras, like we'll see in Sif Tes Zayin. Continues the Mishnah Berurah Sif 15b, the regular Yamini says Mishur Shalahei. Kosva Pri Megadim near Ali do Adin the Shar Oisius. Pri Megadim says it's not a din in a hay. All other letters will be the same. Dalid, Lamid, Pei, Pshuta, Sadik, Pshuta, Kof, Reish, Aitov, Ches, L'chayr B'ches, Ben Rag Yamini, Oismali, and Nishar Behar Yarech Hayamini Ki Yor Dai Bekach. There's a little bit left. That's enough. Adkan l'shaynev. Finally, come on, Mizim Lam Rav Dini Tzuras Ha'isias, as we'll see in a few weeks. Mirz Hashem, Islam and Pei Pshuta V'Stadik Pshuta V'Kov Ba'is Tough, and we will get there. So what's the halacha? As long as it has the size left of an Ois Kitana, it's going to be kosher. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif 15m Gimel, Hainu Me'anekev L'Tzan Malo, above the hole. V'Loi Mitzarfina Le Mashalamata Me'anekev. You can't combine the little down on the bottom with that which is on top. Afilu Man Tinuk D'Loi Chachav L'Tibish Kari L'Ois. Even if you have the Tinuk, the child, which we know that's usual, the litmus test to know if a letter is kosher. So even if the kid could read it, it's still not enough. Kivan, we could tell that it's not proper. And this is, of course, very important. We always have to know the way to test whether it's kosher. Here, the test is not if a child can read it. Here, the test is if it has an ois kitano left. And if you have a bit on top, a bit on bottom, even if the child couldn't make it out, that is not enough. If there's a little bit on top of it, then it's kosher. You even have to show it to a kid. He wrote a teeny little leg, kosher. Let's just see the picture of this, and then we're going to call it a day. Over here, you see that the Pri Megadim is showing us all the other letters that could be a very similar story as all these letters, as long as you have the shear of the ois kitana in each part of these letter, then it's going to suffice to be kosher. Continuing the Mishnah Berurah over here, that it has to be that you actually have the ois ketana left, but if not, if you have a little bit on top, a little bit on the bottom, even though when any child looks at this letter, the kid's going to say it's a hey, the kid's going to understand it, still it's not enough because it doesn't have the requisite shear. And what is the moli ois ketana, as it shows over here, it's going to be this yod. We're going to pick it up from here in the next year.